Section 22 of On Comparative Longevity in Man and the Lower Animals. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Wayne Hom. On Comparative Longevity in Man and the Lower Animals by E. Ray Lankester. Abnormal Longevity in Man. A few words remain to be said on this subject from a general point of view. It has been often treated of under the head of longevity by able writers and curious speculators. An article in the Quarterly Review of January 1868 and one in the Fortnightly Review of April 1869 contain details on this matter which it would be, on that account, superfluous to introduce here, and which, moreover, have a very restricted interest. Abnormal longevity must not be confused with normal potential longevity, nor even with absolute potential longevity. See Antia. There is a normal potential height for various groups and classes of men, namely, that which they may be expected to reach, accidents of death being avoided. There is an absolute potential height, the greatest height which any one man of such a group, under the most favorable conditions, could be expected to attain, and there is the abnormal height of the giant, extending even to 9 feet and recognized as monstrous. Just so with longevity, there are 3 such terms possible, and there appears to be no a priori reason for excluding the last or abnormal longevity from recognition. Sir George Cornwall Lewis and others have endeavored to throw doubt on the possibility of man's longevity exceeding 100 years, though it has been clearly shown that the cases of Jenkins, Parr, and others rest on no proper evidence and are quite inadmissible as proofs of excessive longevity, yet Sir George appears to have rushed into a fanciful conclusion in arbitrarily limiting man to 100 years. The fascination of numbers has had some share in this. There are well authenticated cases of persons who have exceeded the age of 100 years, attested by the registration at baptism, which is what the opponents of man's possibly exceeding 36,500 and odd days of existence have always demanded. There is the case of Miss Bailey, sister of Dr. Bailey, of Mr. Sholtham of Marlsford Hall, who took the chair at a dinner given to his tenants on his 100th birthday, and lived 2 years subsequently. Of this case my friend, Mr. Cordy Jefferson, has been good enough to give me the following sketch. The old man lived at Marlsford, not at Martlesham, famous in history for its Red Lion, and he certainly was not more than 102 years at the time of his death. Baptized at Beckless, in Suffolk, in July 1743, William Sholtham died in May 1845. The exact date of his birth I do not know, but I presume that it preceded his baptism long enough to entitle him to be credited with having lived into his 103rd year, the age which he is represented in obituary notices to have attained. That the above mentioned were the dates of his baptism and death you may be confident. The celebration of the completion of his 100th year took place on July 22nd, 1843, when a great gathering of the gentry and humble folk of the neighborhood feasted at Marlsford Hall, and had sports in the park. If that celebration took place on the actual anniversary day of his birth, he was some 2 months under 102 at his death. So that your statement may be unassailable, you had better speak only of the dates of his baptism and death, unless you make enquiries at Beckless. William Sholtham's circumstances and habits of life were favorable to health. An energetic but not overworked man, he drove a capital business as a country attorney, at Wickham Market and Saxmundham. A lover of country sports, he had for the greater part of his life a house in the country, first at Carlton Cross, a mile out of Saxmundham, and secondly at Marlsford, where he built a handsome hall which, together with its small but picturesque park, may be commended as one of the best country places in the neighbourhood of Wickham Market. He retained his faculties up to his last illness, which did not cover more than a week or so, writing letters with a firm, clear hand, and managing his affairs until the last days of existence. Every successive decade of his career saw him a wealthier man. He never knew serious care, was active, and of what in his day of universal drunkenness was deemed temperate habits, but he was a steady port wine drinker. His son and heir composed a song that was sung at the centenary celebration, one verse of which fairly describes his general mode of living thus: "Some take pills and physic, for gout or for phthisis, try every new nostrum for malady sore. Some quit their home quarters to drink foreign waters, and yet kick the bucket the same as before. But comfort and quiet and temperate diet will make a man healthy and wealthy and bold, while a glass of good wine too will strengthen the spine too, and make him, like Schuldum, 100 years old." By referring to Davies' Suffolk Collections, Pedigree, Schuldum, British Museum, you may ascertain that the Schuldums were, upon the whole, given to longevity. The centenarian's grandfather completed his 86th year. The said centenarian married early in life my father's first cousin, Mary Barber of Boyton, who survived her husband, and died considerably more than 90 years old, and the vigorous constitution and tenacity of life of these long-lived parents were transmitted in some degree to two of their offspring. The centenarian had by Mary Barber 4 children: William Abraham Schuldum, who lived to see his 74th year, though he suffered from epilepsy more violently than any other epileptic patient I have ever known. His fits were frequent and inordinately violent, but did not kill him till he was 73. Lumiel, killed at the battle of Waterloo. Frances Mary, a married woman who died at 42 after giving birth to several children, and Louisa, a spinster, who was born December 23, 1791, and still lives a very vigorous woman for one of her years. I am also indebted to Mr. Cordy Jefferson for a notice of the case of the father of the Reverend Thomas Hart Davies, chaplain at the dockyard, Portsmouth, in 1800. This gentleman died at the supposed age of 116, but his age was afterwards investigated and found to be only 109. Sir Henry Holland informs me that last summer he breakfasted on the St. Lawrence, in America, with a British officer whose commission proved him to be 104 years of age. Sir Henry also has evidence of a case in which the age of 111 years was reached. On a priori grounds, we have seen no reason to believe that man should not have a higher longevity than 100 years as a monstrous and abnormal phenomenon, and on this consideration we may be not indisposed to accept statements as to ages as great as 110 or even 120 years being attained, even though such an occurrence were not absolutely demonstrated and proved. The expenditure implied in distinction, and the generative expenditure implied in 22 children, the offspring of a lady who certainly was alive in her 100th year, cannot be held to militate against the general law. These are isolated cases, where unusual vigor, i.e., abundant matter of life, has increased longevity, and the other quantities simultaneously. There is not a sufficient number of trustworthy records of cases of high longevity to make an extended testing by them of the conclusions arrived at as to causes favoring longevity, likely to be of any real value. In the course of what has been written, the exceedingly involved nature of the inquiry, and the absence of all but the fewest data as to comparative longevity, have been made sufficiently apparent. It is to this condition of the subject that we would gladly direct attention as the cause of indefinite and speculative character in an essay treating of it. It is hoped that in indicating possible lines of productive enquiry and in pointing to the more prominent and remediable gaps in information, some more practical result has been attained. It would have been possible, no doubt, to carry mere speculation into greater detail than has been attempted here, as to the influences affecting longevity in man, but the facts, such as they are, seem fairly to admit of no more positive inferences than have been here given. End of section 22. End of On Comparative Longevity in Men and the Lower Animals by E. Ray Lankester.